Picture a single person sitting in a room with a laptop. They have an idea, right? Like a vision for a massive, really complex software platform.
Right, something that usually takes a whole team.
Exactly. But over the course of just 6 months, using almost entirely natural language, they spin up this entire company. I mean, they don't just build the front-end interface.
They need the whole stack.
Yeah, the whole stack. They architect the database, they integrate the user authentication, wire up the analytics, and build the payment gateways, and they scale it to 250,000 users.
Which is just wild.
It's unbelievable. And then they sell it for $80 million in cold, hard cash.
Just one person.
Just one guy. Now imagine what happens to the 50 engineers, the quality assurance testers, and the product managers who used to be required to build that exact same company. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are staring down a massive stack of sources today. We've got articles, research papers, labor reports, open source data from late 2025 and early 2026.
And it is a jarring picture.
Very jarring, because we are unpacking this staggering, completely paradoxical explosion of artificial intelligence over the last year.
The paradox is really, well, it's the defining feature of the data you just mentioned.
Right.
Because the overarching theme across all these sources is a definitive behavioral pivot in the technology itself. We have definitively moved out of the era of, chatting and squarely into the era of acting.
Acting. Yeah, that's the key word.
Exactly. AI has evolved from this conversational novelty, like a clever parlor trick that helps you draft a polite email or maybe summarizes a PDF for you, into an actual autonomous force.
And a force that is actively reshaping things.
Oh, absolutely. It's currently tearing through the structural foundations of our economy. It's pushing the boundaries of elite mathematics. And honestly, it's completely altering the mechanics of global warfare.
So the mission for this deep dive is for you, the listener, to see how we connect these dots that might initially seem, completely isolated from one another.
Right, because they're all part of the same shift.
Exactly. We're going to look at the massive job market turbulence that closed out 2025. We have to examine the sudden, almost terrifying rise of the $1 million solo developer.
The solo giants.
Yeah, the solo giants. And we're going to pull back the curtain on a quiet but deeply concerning gender divide that is ripping open in the workforce.
That part is crucial.
It really is. Plus, we will tear down the mechanics of the fastest growing open source project in the history of the internet. And finally, we're going to look at the terrifying leaps in elite machine reasoning and what happens when you put that kind of intelligence on a geopolitical battlefield.
A lot of ground to cover.
It is. So let's start with the hardest numbers in the stack. The labor market data.
Right. So the Challenger Gray and Christmas report from December 2025 is really the clearest lens we have into the immediate fallout here.
And the bleeding here is severe. Just looking at this data, U.S. job cuts surpassed 1.17 million by November 2025.
A massive number.
We haven't seen an environment like this since the 2020 pandemic. And honestly, if you remove the pandemic anomaly, you have to go all the way back to the Great Recession in 2009.
Or the dot-com bust.
Right, exactly. To see corporate restructuring at this kind of velocity, technology and telecommunications led the absolute volume of cuts.
Yeah, Verizon specifically.
Yes. Verizon alone drove a massive spike in the telecom sector, pushing their industry's layoffs up like 268% compared to the same period in 2024.
Wow.
But it wasn't just tech. You look at the food industry, specifically beef processing. You look at services. Even nonprofits saw a 409% increase in job cuts.
And we really have to look at the stated catalysts for these numbers because the terminology that corporate boards are using has completely shifted.
It's a little more direct now, right?
Exactly. Historically, you'd see vague terms, things like market conditions or synergy. But now it's incredibly explicit. Broad restructuring accounted for over 128,000 cuts. But direct AI displacement, meaning companies are explicitly stating to their shareholders that they are eliminating human roles because an artificial intelligence system can now execute those tasks that accounted for nearly 55,000 jobs in that period.
I really want to pause on that 55,000 number because that is just the companies willing to say the quiet part out loud, right?
Well, exactly. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
I mean, for every company that publicly admits they're firing people to replace them with an algorithm, there have to be 5 more hiding those exact same AI-driven cuts under the umbrella of, general restructuring.
Oh, without a doubt.
But beyond the corporate sector, the data points to a massive public sector contraction happening simultaneously.
Yeah, the data explicitly highlights the Department of Government Efficiency, or the DOGE initiative.
Right.
According to the Challenger report, this initiative was actually the leading single cause of job cut announcements in 2025.
The leading single cause. That's staggering.
It was cited in nearly 294,000 planned layoffs.
Oh.
As federal workers and federal contractors. And from a macroeconomic perspective, to be totally neutral about it, what's crucial is the secondary shockwave.
The ripple effect.
Right. The report tracks over 20,000 additional downstream cuts.
So what are those exactly?
These are private sector businesses, local organizations, and nonprofits that basically relied on federal grants or contracts.
Yeah.
And they're suddenly losing their funding and having to eliminate their own workforces.
Just cascading cuts.
Exactly. If we look at this purely as a structural economic event, we are witnessing a simultaneous rapid contraction of both traditional corporate employment and federal administrative infrastructure.
So I'm looking at this landscape, right? 1 million jobs gone, entire federal departments slashed, telecom giants just gutting their back offices, the house is actively being torn down.
Yeah, that's what the data says.
But then I flip to the next page in our source stack, and I am staring at data from the World Economic Forum and MUFG, and they are projecting a massive boom.
Right, the 78 million number.
Yes. They project a net growth of 78 million jobs globally by 2030. They claim 170 million new jobs will be created, which they say will completely offset the 92 million that they expect to be displaced.
It sounds totally contradictory.
It does. I have to push back on this. 78 million net new jobs. Doing what? If an AI can write code, handle marketing, and run an entire HR department autonomously, what are these 170 million new humans supposed to be doing? Managing the AI.
Wow.
The AI manages itself. How do we reconcile this immediate devastating pain right now with this utopian promise 5 years out?
It's the defining economic friction of this decade. Because technology traditionally displaces tasks immediately, but it creates entire new industries on a severe delay.
Okay, a delay.
Think about the invention of the automobile. The blacksmiths and the carriage makers, they felt the economic pain overnight.
Right. Nobody needed a carriage anymore.
Exactly. But the jobs that replaced them, the highway construction crews, the motel operators, the suburban real estate developers, the long-haul trucking logistics networks, those industries took decades to materialize.
Ah, I see.
They couldn't even be conceptualized until the automobile was already ubiquitous.
So you're saying the WEF is banking on industries that literally do not exist yet?
They have to be.
Yeah.
Because the jobs being vaporized in 2025, the clerical work, the routine syntax coding, the administrative overhead, those roles are highly codifiable.
Right.
The pain of losing them is instantaneous because the AI can just slot right into the existing workflow. But the jobs being created require entirely new paradigms of human-machine interaction.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, they aren't about typing on a keyboard anymore. They're about orchestrating swarms of agents, or maybe auditing algorithmic decisions in high-stakes environments, or building the massive physical infrastructure to support these huge compute needs.
Right. Data centers, power grids.
Exactly. The problem is, a laid-off telecom middle manager in 2025 cannot apply for a job in a theoretical industry that won't mature until 2029.
That's the friction. The teardown and the rebuild are happening on completely different timelines. And that friction point is where the wealth transfers happen. Because if these massive corporations and federal agencies are shedding all these jobs, the underlying capital and the capability to create value hasn't just evaporated into thin air.
No, it's just moving.
Exactly. It is shifting. And based on the late 2024 and 2025 case studies we have in our sources, power is shifting radically toward the hyper-capable individual. Let's look at the guy I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, Meir Shlomo and his company, Base 44.
Shlomo's story is the absolute blueprint for the labor shift we're talking about here.
It's just an unbelievable trajectory. Meir Shlomo is a 31-year-old Israeli coder. Late 2024, he finishes a stint of IDF reserve duty. He comes home and starts tinkering with a side project, something he dubs Base 44.
Just tinkering.
Yeah, just tinkering.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, 6 months, he sells it to Wix for $80 million. Plus, like a $25 million retention bonus for a tiny team of 8 people he eventually brought on.
We really need to unpack the mechanics of what Base 44 actually is, though. Because the product itself is the very thing causing the corporate job cuts we just discussed.
It's true. So how does it work?
Base 44 allows anyone to create a full-featured web or mobile application by simply describing what they want.
Describing it, like talking to it.
Exactly. You do not need a developer team. You type your vision into a text box using plain conversational language, and Base 44 autonomously manages the entire backend.
It provisions the database.
Yes, it sets up the analytics dashboard, it integrates email services and user authentication protocols, everything.
The traction was just wild. He had 100,000 users in a matter of weeks, scaled to 250,000 users shortly after. He secured partnerships with major players like eToro and SimilarWeb.
And the financials are fascinating too.
Yeah, in May 2025 alone, this side project generated $189,000 in pure profit. Keep in mind, that's net profit after paying the absolute fortune it costs in compute tokens to run the underlying large language models.
Right, because API calls are expensive.
Super expensive, but he was making profit. Shlomo was posting on LinkedIn that he was pushing updates to production 13 times a day. He admitted the stability wasn't perfect, but it was, quote, good enough for people to build real businesses on.
This phenomenon has been dubbed vibe coding by the tech community.
Vibe coding, I love that term.
It's perfect, right? And it represents a fundamental rewiring of how software is built. Because for the last 40 years, software development required strict adherence to syntax.
Right, memorizing languages.
Yeah, you needed to speak the exact mathematical language of the machine.
Yeah.
Python, C++, C, React. If you missed a single semicolon, the entire system crashed.
So frustrating.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
But vibe coding means a compiler now understands intent. Natural language has become the ultimate programming language.
You don't need to know how to structure a SQL query.
Not at all. You just need to know how to clearly articulate the business logic of what you want to achieve.
Let's think about the leverage here for you, the listener. It's like standing in an empty room and simply conducting an invisible orchestra. You have a lead backend engineer, a front-end designer, a quality assurance testing team, and a DevOps specialist, all compressed into a single text prompt.
It's immense power.
A person with a clear vision and good taste can execute at the scale of an entire mid-sized tech company. But I keep coming back to the math of leverage here.
Right.
If one person with Base 44 can do the work of 50 engineers, what happens to the other 49? I mean, we elevate the solo giant, the guy holding the $80 million check, but we are leaving a massive swath of the workforce behind.
And those other 49 are not a random cross-section of society.
This is where it gets dark.
It does. The impact of this automation is highly concentrated, and it is exposing a stark demographic fault line. This is detailed extensively in the March 2026 report from the International Labor Organization, the ILO.
I'm so glad you brought this up because this is the quiet crisis nobody wants to talk about. The ILO data confirms that generative AI is disproportionately threatening roles held by women.
The numbers are incredibly clear.
They really are. Female-dominated occupations are almost twice as likely to be exposed to generative AI. They found a 29% exposure rate for women's roles compared to just 16% for male-dominated occupations.
And it gets worse when you look at the highest risk tiers.
Yeah, when you isolate the data down to the absolute highest risk category for automation, 16% of female roles are highly exposed compared to a mere 3% for men.
The mechanism driving this disparity is occupational segregation.
Can you break that down? Sure.
The modern corporate environment was built with specific stratifications. Historically, women have been heavily concentrated in clerical, administrative, and business support roles. Think secretaries, receptionists, payroll clerks, accounting assistants, human resource coordinators.
Okay, yeah.
What do all of these roles have in common? They are highly routine, they are entirely text-based, and they are built on codifiable logic.
Moving data around.
Exactly. They are about moving information from one silo to another, summarizing data, scheduling. Generative AI was practically tailor-made to substitute these exact functions.
It's the ultimate irony. The skills that define stable, middle-class office work for decades are the first to be automated. Meanwhile, look at the jobs that men traditionally dominate.
The physical trades.
Right, construction, manufacturing, electrical work, plumbing, manual trades. Those are physically grounded. You can build the smartest language model on Earth, but a chatbot cannot frame a house.
No, it can't.
It cannot crawl under a sink and fix a burst pipe. The physical world provides a moat against immediate AI displacement.
There's a second layer to this vulnerability that the ILO report highlights too, which makes the situation even more precarious.
What's that?
It's the representation gap in the rooms where the AI is actually being built. Women make up only about 30% of the global AI workforce, and that percentage has been stubbornly stagnant since around 2016.
So they aren't the ones building the replacements.
Exactly. They are massively underrepresented in the core STEM fields. The machine learning engineers, the research scientists, the architects designing the algorithms that are automating the clerical work.
Think about the socioeconomic loop we are creating here.
Mhm.
If we connect this back to the World Economic Forum's promise of 78 million new jobs, are we accidentally building an economy that structurally excludes an entire demographic?
A very real risk.
The clerical jobs, predominantly held by women, are being vaporized. The new high-paying jobs are in AI management, deployment, and engineering. But women only make up 30% of that field. So the displaced workers don't have the runway or the specific technical background to step into the new roles being created. The wealth concentrates into the hands of the individual who masters the new tools, usually a male developer, like our Base 44 example, while a massive segment of the female workforce is just hollowed out.
The ILO draws a very firm conclusion here. They say technology is not a force of nature. It is not neutral.
It's a choice.
Right. It is actively shaped by the society that builds it. And AI systems inherently reflect the existing biases of their training data and their creators. If we let this transition happen passively, AI will simply amplify existing inequalities at a scale we have never seen before.
So what's the fix, according to the report?
The ILO argues that avoiding this requires aggressive, deliberate policy intervention. We are talking about massive, targeted reskilling initiatives, profound social dialogue involving labor organizations, and actively embedding gender equality frameworks into the procurement and deployment of enterprise AI tools.
But the reality is the technology isn't waiting for policy to catch up. The tools replacing those clerical workers and empowering the vibe coders are advancing by the week.
By the day, sometimes.
Yeah? We aren't just talking about a chat interface anymore. We have crossed a threshold into a fundamentally new paradigm. The industry calls it Agentic AI.
Agentic AI is the defining technological leap of 2026. It is the literal embodiment of the shift from chatting to acting that we talked about.
And the most cinematic, kind of mind-bending way to explain what an agent actually is the saga of Peter Steinberger and his creation, OpenClaw.
This story has everything.
It really does. So Steinberger is an Austrian software developer based in Vienna. His background is a classic bootstrap success story. Back in 2011, he built a PDF manipulation company called PSPDF Kit straight out of his apartment.
Total indie dev.
Yeah. He grinded for a decade, grew it to a massive scale, sold it for a reported 100 million euros, and then, well, he just completely crashed, totally burnout.
He has been incredibly transparent about his mental state post-exit. He spent 3 years basically wandering in the wilderness. He went to therapy, attended ayahuasca retreats in the jungle, and really struggled to find purpose.
Wow.
And crucially, he attempted to build new software during this time, and he failed 43 consecutive times. 43 distinct projects that went absolutely nowhere.
Which makes Project 44 the ultimate redemption arc. In November 2025, he starts tinkering again. He initially names the project Claudebot, but Anthropic hits him with a trademark notice, so he pivots and renames it OpenClaw.
And it explodes.
Oh, Project 44 essentially breaks the open source internet. In under 5 months, OpenClaw accumulates 346,000 GitHub stars. To grasp the magnitude of that, it took React, which is the foundational web framework built by Facebook, 8 years to hit the numbers OpenClaw achieved in weeks.
Unprecedented.
It blew past Linux. It became the fastest growing, most starred software repository in the history of GitHub.
But the developer community didn't react this way just because it was a neat tool.
Right, it wasn't just a gimmick.
No. They reacted because OpenClaw solved the core limitation of AI. Before this, you had to interact with an AI. You prompted it, and it responded. It was a stagnant loop. OpenClaw introduced something called a heartbeat scheduler.
Okay, let's break that down because the heartbeat scheduler is the secret sauce here. How is it different from a normal prompt?
Think of a heartbeat scheduler like a persistent internal clock, but merged with a language model. Instead of waiting dormant for you to ask it a question, OpenClaw wakes itself up at configured intervals, say every 5 minutes.
Okay.
It looks at the state of your computer, checks its internal task list, and decides autonomously if it needs to take action. It completely breaks the reliance on a human trigger.
So it's not waiting for me. I could be asleep, and OpenClaw wakes up, checks my email inbox, sees an urgent message from a client, looks at my calendar, drafts a reply proposing a meeting time, and just sends the email.
Exactly. Or it executes complex shell commands in your terminal, provisions servers, or navigates a travel website to book a flight based on your known preferences.
It actually acts.
It acts. And it accomplishes this using another massive breakthrough called semantic snapshots.
Right, because having an AI constantly look at your screen to understand what's going on, that usually requires massive computing power, right?
Yeah.
Processing pixels is incredibly heavy on a graphics card.
Precisely. If an AI has to take a high-resolution image of your screen every 5 seconds and run vision models on it, it will literally melt your laptop.
Right.
Semantic snapshots bypass the visual layer entirely. Instead of taking a picture, OpenClaw parses the underlying operating system data, the accessibility tree, the document object model of a web browser.
The code beneath the screen.
Yes. It extracts the structural metadata of what is happening on screen and converts it into tiny, lightweight text files.
So instead of looking at a photograph of a massive library to find a book, it's just instantly reading the text of the library's index card system.
That's a perfect analogy. And because it's just reading tiny text files, it is unbelievably cheap and fast to run. It runs locally on your own machine. Your data doesn't have to be sent to a massive server farm in California.
It stays private.
It stays entirely private. This led to a massive ecosystem explosion. The community built over 44,000 custom skills for OpenClaw, allowing it to interface with almost any software you can imagine.
When you build the fastest growing open source project in history, and you prove that local autonomous agents actually work, the titans of Silicon Valley don't just take notice. They go to war over you.
Oh, the bidding war was legendary.
Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, personally reaches out to Peter Steinberger on WhatsApp. And Zuckerberg didn't just send a generic recruiting pitch.
No, he was deep in the weeds.
The guy literally downloaded OpenClaw, installed it on his own local machine, ran it for a week, and sent Steinberger real-time, highly technical feedback. He was submitting bug reports and using, from what I understand, some very colorful, blunt language to describe the features that were breaking on his machine.
You really have to look at Meta's strategic position to understand Zuckerberg's obsession here. Meta has WhatsApp, right? A messaging platform with billions of users. If personal AI agents become the primary way people interact with the digital world, Meta cannot afford for WhatsApp to become just a dumb pipe that someone else's AI uses to send messages.
Right. They need to own the agent.
They needed the OpenClaw community and the Agentic architecture to integrate directly into their ecosystem.
But Zuckerberg didn't get him. In February 2026, Sam Altman drops the hammer and announces that OpenAI has successfully acquired Peter Steinberger.
And the structure of this deal is so fascinating.
It was an acqui-hire. They didn't purchase the intellectual property of OpenClaw. They essentially paid an estimated $2 to $15 million, just a massive signing bonus, basically to hire Steinberger as an individual to lead OpenAI's internal agent development team.
Steinberger had all the leverage. And his non-negotiable condition for taking the OpenAI role was the preservation of his creation.
It had to stay open.
OpenClaw had to remain open source under an MIT license. It was transitioned to an independent foundation. OpenAI sponsors it with compute credits and resources, but structurally, they do not control the repository.
Like Google and Chromium.
It's a very similar governance model to how Google relates to the open source Chromium browser project, exactly.
When Steinberger explained why he chose OpenAI over Meta, he cited access to their unreleased frontier models, their massive compute clusters, specifically the new Cerebrus systems, and the ability to distribute his work to hundreds of millions of ChatGPT users. But, there is a glaring, massive geographical irony staring us in the face here.
A brain drain.
Yes. Europe's tech scene, operating out of a flat in Vienna, produced one of the most brilliant architectural minds of this generation. He built the defining project of the year. But no European institution, no EU-based tech company could even come close to providing the resources required to keep him there.
A real problem.
It perfectly illustrates this massive compute gap. The U.S. hyperscalers are just swallowing global talent whole.
It is a profound structural brain drain. Europe has practically perfected the art of producing elite technical talent purely for American consumption.
Because of the regulations?
Partly, yes. The regulatory frameworks in the EU, such as the AI Act, combined with the total lack of native, sovereign, hyperscale infrastructure, meaning massive data centers capable of training frontier models, it left Steinberger with no domestic options. If you want to build the future of AI, the gravity of Silicon Valley's compute resources is just inescapable.
Well, let's follow that compute. We have these autonomous agents running locally via OpenClaw, executing tasks on our behalf. but for an agent to actually manage complex workflows without making catastrophic errors.
Like accidentally deleting a database instead of backing it up.
Exactly. To avoid that, it needs more than a clever scheduling loop. It needs deep, reliable, logical reasoning. It can't just operate like an autocomplete, guessing the next statistically probable word.
Right.
It has to be able to formulate a plan, hold a chain of thought over hours, recognize when it makes a mistake, and correct itself.
Which is the perfect bridge to the most astonishing technical breakthrough in our entire source stack, the results of the 2025 International Mathematical Olympiad, the IMO.
If you are not deep in the academic math world, you really need to understand what the IMO is. It is the world's most prestigious, punishing mathematical competition for high school prodigies.
It's brutal.
Kids train for thousands of hours just to qualify. To put it in perspective, Fields medalists, which is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for mathematics, they almost always have an IMO gold medal in their background. It is the ultimate crucible for human genius.
And in July 2025, the paradigm shifted. An experimental reasoning system from OpenAI, and it's worth noting this was later matched by Google DeepMind's Gemini, utilizing a framework called DeepThink, achieved a score that placed it firmly at the gold medal level.
A gold medal level AI.
The OpenAI model scored 35 out of 42 possible points, successfully solving 5 out of the 6 incredibly complex problems presented.
The conditions of the test are what make this completely mind-blowing. The AI did not get special treatment. It took the exam under the exact same constraints as the human teenagers in the room.
Right. No internet.
2 distinct 4.5-hour sessions. 0 internet access. No external calculators or computational software. It was fed the problems and had to generate full, open-ended, natural language mathematical proofs entirely from scratch.
The grading was blind.
Yeah, afterward, 3 independent expert human mathematicians who are former IMO medalists themselves blindly graded the AI's proofs. They had no idea they were reading machine output, and they unanimously agreed it deserved 35 points.
We really have to draw a hard line between this achievement and previous AI milestones.
Like AlphaGo.
Exactly. When DeepMind's AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol at the game of Go in 2016, it was a spectacular feat of engineering. But Go, no matter how complex, is a deterministic system. It is a closed board with strict, immutable rules and a definite win or lose state. An AI can play millions of games against itself at light speed, using reinforcement learning to memorize the statistical probability of winning from any given board state. It's pattern matching on an astronomical scale.
But an IMO math problem isn't a game board. A proof isn't just crunching numbers. It's essentially writing a highly structured philosophical argument in the language of abstract mathematics.
You're inventing a logical path.
Right, a path from point A to point B that has never been written before. How on earth did they get a large language model, which, let's be real, is notoriously prone to hallucinating facts and stumbling over basic arithmetic to execute elite mathematical creativity?
The breakthrough is a concept called test-time compute scaling, paired with advanced reinforcement learning.
Test-time compute. Okay.
Historically, when you prompted an LLM, it spent a fraction of a second calculating the first word, then the next, and spat out an answer. It had no internal monologue. Test-time compute changes the architecture. Instead of generating an answer instantly, the model is instructed to, quote, think for hours.
So it's essentially running a massive internal simulation before it ever speaks.
Exactly. Over that 4.5-hour window, the AI generates a potential step in a proof. It then uses an internal reward model to evaluate if that step makes logical sense.
And if it doesn't.
If it hits a dead end, it discards that path, backtracks, and tries a different theoretical approach. It is conducting a massive, exhaustive search tree of logical validity. It drafts, edits, verifies, and rewrites thousands of times internally before it finally outputs the completed proof.
I wanted to just sit with this for a second. If a language model writing a slightly clunky poem in 2023 was a parlor trick, this is like watching a pocket calculator win a Nobel Prize in physics.
It really is an entirely different echelon of cognition.
It's not drafting a novel, it's proving the fundamental truths of the universe. But there is a weird caveat to this intelligence, right? Andrej Karpathy, one of the founding researchers at OpenAI, has been heavily discussing this phenomenon. He calls it jagged intelligence.
Jagged intelligence is, well, it's the most counterintuitive aspect of modern AI. As humans, we assume intelligence is a smooth, generalized curve.
Right, if you're smart, you're smart.
Exactly. If you are smart enough to understand quantum mechanics, we assume you're smart enough to figure out how to operate a microwave. But AI does not possess a generalized human brain.
So what does jagged mean for it?
Jagged intelligence means an AI can exhibit superhuman mathematical creativity, solving a complex geometry problem that would completely baffle 99.9% of humanity, and then in the very next prompt, it will stumble on a basic, common-sense reasoning task that a 5-year-old child would understand intuitively.
It's like working alongside an alien savant. It can map an 11-dimensional topological manifold, but if you ask it to plan a dinner party, it might suggest seating your sworn enemy next to you, because it just doesn't understand human social nuance.
That's a great way to put it.
But here's my question. If AI has reliably hit this gold medal level in abstract mathematical reasoning, what happens to human researchers? If it can solve IMO problems today, it will be solving open, unproven research problems tomorrow. Are human mathematicians just going to become the administrative assistants to machine geniuses?
Terence Tao, who is widely considered the greatest living mathematician, has theorized about this exact transition.
Oh, what does he say?
In the near term, he sees AI acting as a highly capable co-author. The human provides the intuition, the taste, and the conceptual direction. The AI handles the grueling, time-consuming verification work and explores the dense mathematical search spaces.
So it's a partnership.
Yes, it frees the human to focus purely on conceptual breakthroughs. But you are right to ask the long-term question, because the definition of what constitutes a uniquely human conceptual breakthrough is shrinking rapidly.
Which brings us to the most sobering reality of this entire deep dive. We are handing over the keys. We are connecting systems that possess this elite yet jagged reasoning capability to agentic frameworks like OpenClaw.
It's a volatile mix.
It is. We are giving them the ability to take action on our computers, in our databases, and in the physical world. What happens when these incredibly powerful systems inevitably break? Or, far worse, what happens when they are intentionally weaponized?
The dark side of this competence isn't theoretical. It is actively playing out. Let's look at the severe security nightmare that immediately surrounded OpenClaw's rapid deployment.
Oh man, it was an absolute disaster. Because OpenClaw grew so incredibly fast, the security infrastructure completely collapsed under the weight of adoption.
Totally collapsed.
In a single chaotic 4-day period in March 2026, security researchers dropped 9 common vulnerabilities and exposures CVEs on the project. One of them scored a 9.9 out of 10 in critical severity.
A 9.9 is basically as bad as it gets.
Researchers scanned the public internet and found over 135,000 OpenClaw instances exposed globally. Out of those, 50,000 were fully vulnerable to remote code execution.
For anyone outside of cybersecurity, remote code execution, or RCE, is the absolute worst-case scenario. It means a malicious actor anywhere in the world can bypass your security, inject their own commands, and take total control of the machine running the agent.
They own your computer.
They own it. And the vulnerabilities weren't just in the core code. The ClawHub marketplace, which is where users upload and share custom skills for their agents, was absolutely flooded with malware.
The custom skills.
Yeah, security teams flagged over 800 malicious skills. Some of these were incredibly sophisticated. They were designed to silently siphon off your API keys, scrape your passwords, and exfiltrate your data in the background, all while the agent cheerfully pretended to manage your calendar.
It's the ultimate Trojan horse. You think you have this tireless, brilliant assistant booking your flights and drafting your emails. Meanwhile, it has a backdoor wide open, packaging up your banking details and sending them to a server in another jurisdiction. And this is just consumer software. We are talking about personal laptops and small business servers. When we elevate this exact same agentic technology paired with elite reasoning to the level of global security and warfare, the implications are chilling.
To really understand the military application, we have to look closely at the RSIS report from April 2024, which analyzed the integration trends that have now accelerated massively into 2025 and 2026.
Right.
The report details how artificial intelligence is being deeply, fundamentally integrated into the architecture of modern warfare. It uses the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, as a primary case study for algorithmic warfare in action. And it's crucial we look at the mechanics of this impartially to understand the strategic reality of the modern battlefield.
Absolutely. If we look at the defensive side first, the application of this technology is mathematically staggering.
It's beyond human limits.
The report cites the events of April 2024, when Iran launched a coordinated attack involving over 300 drones and ballistic missiles directed at Israel. The IDF utilized AI algorithms deeply integrated into the Iron Dome and Arrow missile defense systems.
Right.
The AI was able to track, allocate, and calculate interception vectors for those incoming threats in split seconds. A human operator simply does not have the cognitive bandwidth to calculate physics equations for 300 simultaneous hypersonic targets.
It's impossible.
The AI defensive shield acted with a speed and precision that humans literally cannot replicate.
But the very nature of AI is that it is a dual-use technology. A system that can track a missile can be inverted to target one. The RSIS report also details the offensive integration of AI.
Project Lavender.
Yes. It highlights allegations brought by various media outlets regarding an IDF system known as Project Lavender. According to the reports cited by RSIS, Lavender is an AI-powered database that processes vast, multi-layered arrays of intelligence data to generate potential human bombing targets in Gaza, allegedly with minimal human oversight in the final validation process.
Now, we must state clearly here, for the listener, that the IDF strongly refutes the claims made in those specific media reports regarding the lack of oversight. They have explicitly stated that Lavender is not an autonomous targeting system designed to hit civilians, but is rather an intelligence database used to cross-reference data and identify military operatives of terrorist organizations.
Right. And regardless of the highly classified specific operational parameters of Lavender, the broader global strategic shift is undeniable.
It's happening everywhere.
Militaries worldwide, from the U.S. to China to European defense coalitions, are moving rapidly toward what the IDF terms multi-domain combat methods. This is a battlefield where AI continuously assimilates live intelligence from drone feeds, cyber operations, satellite imagery, and ground infantry. It fuses that data and allocates targets at a speed that entirely outpaces human cognition.
This raises the ultimate terrifying question. We've talked about AI taking over clerical jobs in an HR department. We've talked about AI helping a solo coder make $80 million. But when we put AI in charge of lethal, autonomous decisions, how do we solve the black box problem?
That is the million-dollar question.
If a machine learning model, utilizing jagged intelligence and test-time compute, makes a targeting error on a battlefield and strikes a civilian center, who is accountable? The programmer in Silicon Valley who built the base model.
The commanding officer who trusted the algorithm.
Or the algorithm itself. You can't put lines of code in front of a war crimes tribunal.
That profound accountability vacuum is exactly why we are seeing a desperate, frantic push for international AI governance.
Like the REAIM process.
Yes. Initiatives like the REAIM process responsible AI in the military domain are struggling to establish basic ethical norms and operational guardrails. But they are fighting a fundamental geopolitical tension.
Speed versus safety.
Exactly. Adhering to strict ethical AI norms, requiring a human in the loop for every decision, artificially limits a nation's military strike speed. In a global arms race, speed is dominance. There is a terrifyingly fine line between building an AI defensive shield to protect your citizens and launching unrestrained algorithmic warfare. The incentive to remove the human entirely from the kill chain to achieve faster response times is immense.
We have covered an incredible, overwhelming amount of ground today. We started with a turbulent labor market, shedding over 1 million jobs, while paradoxically promising 78 million new ones in industries that don't yet exist.
We explored the magic and the leverage of vibe coding that allowed Mayor Shlomo to build an $80 million empire alone.
We looked hard at the deeply concerning gender divide, where women's clerical roles are uniquely exposed to the AI wrecking ball. We unpacked the open-source agentic revolution with Peter Steinberger, the heartbeat scheduler of OpenClaw, and the massive compute gap draining European talent.
We explored the elite test-time reasoning that secured an IMO gold medal.
And finally, we confronted the extreme life-or-death dilemmas of AI vulnerabilities and algorithmic warfare.
If there is one final provocative concept I can leave the listener to mull over as they process all of this, it's the question of identity. We've spent the last decade anxiously asking how we will use AI to do our work better. How can it make us faster, richer, more efficient? But looking at the landscape of 2026, the real question is shifting beneath our feet. When an AI becomes the premier coder, capable of replacing 50 engineers, when it becomes the elite mathematician proving the secrets of the universe, when it becomes the split-second soldier executing multi-domain combat, what happens to the human need for purpose? Are we destined to simply become the passive administrative supervisors of an alien intelligence that completely outpaces our own? Or will we be forced to find an entirely new way to define human value when our economic utility and our cognitive supremacy are no longer guaranteed?
That is the paradigm shift we are living through. We aren't just changing the tools we use, we are changing the definition of what it means to be useful. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. As always, keep questioning the world around you.